Hello everyone, it is great to see you. Today we're looking at another variation of the Sicilian opening. Today we're looking at the Sveshnikov variation. This is also called the pelican or Lasker pelican in some other texts, especially older. It was called the pelican. Now it is usually referred to as the Sveshnikov variation. I'm actually unsure if I'm pronouncing it in the right way. So if I'm doing anything wrong, please do comment in the section down below. But without further ado, let's get started. Okay, let's start with the Sicilian. So we'll go e4, c5. This is the basic ideas to the Sicilian opening. And then here, like the many other openings we saw, we're going to go knight f3, knight c6. And then again, in this case, d4, c takes d4. And this is kind of our way of thinking about an open Sicilian variation. And what actually we can do in this position is just take, and then we can actually do something like knight to f6, knight c3, and then in this position, the Sveshnikov variation is actually going for e5. Oh, give me a second. Oh, wait. I'm actually really confused. Oh, sorry. Instead of, oh yeah, e5. So this is basically the idea, and the central idea for black is immediately opening up the center, attacking this knight, winning a tempo, kind of gaining control of the center that it first lost the tempo by playing c5. And so the first defining move of the Sveshnikov, and by playing e5, the black gains space but also weakens the e5 square later on, because it could have played something like e6 in order to defend that. And so the d5 idea usually is played way later on, or not played at all. In this position, knight usually will go knight d to b5 like this, and then they'll try to jump either to some place like d6 or even to the a3 or c7 square. Either of these it's all looking at, and it really tries to avoid a backward retreat to knight f3, because this is kind of conceding too much of its center control. And so what actually black does in this position is usually go d6, and this supports this e5 pawn, also creates a kind of a backward pawn, but this is necessary for central control. In this case, what we can actually do is go bishop to d5, pinning this knight to the queen, and in this case also provoking an attack, and kind of provoking something like h6, a weakness on the king's side, because usually the black king will castle on the king's side. And so the main setup after this usually goes a6, taking away this, and then we go to a3, and then black can play something like b5, actually really opening up the queen side, trying to attack there, because usually that's where white is going to castle. And so in this position, what white can do is exchange this bishop for a knight and weaken black's pawn structure. And because it has a doubled pawn, this king cannot castle this way, so the king is kind of lost in terms of where to go. And in this position, black can actually play knight to d5. Sorry. White can actually play knight to d5, and this is a really good move, because it really takes control of the center. It really cannot be challenged, because all these pawns are gone from earlier, and so kind of a solid position here. A very important move for you to play, and immediately we see here that we have quite a bit of an advantage if black plays something like this, almost a 1 point advantage. So very interesting, and this leads to a kind of typical structure for this kind of defense, the pelican defense, where the black has a bishop pair, and white has actually traded off one of its bishop, and white really has a immovable knight here, because it cannot move here or here, but it has a very good knight over here. It has a really good long-term structural pressure on overall on the white side, and so a really dynamic game. And white's ideas is really the knight on d5 here is unchallenged by any pawn, so this is going to be a really important outpost. We also have pressure on, for example, on places like knight d6 and f6, because these are kind of isolated pawns. These are structural weaknesses to target. We also have a kingside pawn majority because of this structure, and so some later on, just kind of pushing this for an attack in the endgame is also really interesting. And essentially, because we have traded off our black squares, we have really strong control of the light squares, and so this is a really interesting position as well. Yeah, and so what we can actually do here as well is, let us see. And in this position, black's ideas are essentially that this bishop pair gives them an open diagonal, and gives them really long-term activity. They also are thinking of this queenside pawn extension with a6, sometimes b5 even. Really strong ideas here, and also a rook c8 setup where this kind of idea of pushing towards the pawn, the queen side is really essential. Also thinking of bishop b7, kind of this fianchetto here as well, really strong move. In terms of dynamic, they have to accept the weak squares, especially on these sides and also on the center as well. But they can also do something like an f5 break, really challenge the center, and really challenging white center and really giving a good attack. And so in this position, various moves that white can play actually. They want me to play bishop takes b5, a takes b5, knight queen takes b5, knight takes d5. And this is really important because right now black is a pawn up, but they're a point up because they have an extra bishop, and so we have gotten rid of a lot of the bishop pair, but this immobile knight has come to play again and is staring right into the king side, and so the right after the king. So not a good position for black at all. In terms of the advantage, I would say it's about equal, but very strong ideas for white, and I think psychologically this is going to be a harder game for black to win. And so these ideas, and also alternative sideline ideas, after d6, what knight can actually play is what white can play instead of bishop g5 is actually something like knight d5, going right into the center, trying to attack it immediately. Also something like bishop e2, just quiet development here, but actually the engine doesn't like it too much. We actually have a4 ideas as well, really trying to restrict black's movement and queenside expansion, and something like g3 to set up a fianchetto later on. And so these ideas would really be difficult for black to comfortably counterplay, and so various ideas here as well. Some really good ideas here to note as well is the if white is really not careful about this a6 b5 trap can later on become really difficult for white, and so these kind of expansion traps are something to take account of. Also, black can place do some really crazy sacrifices with these lines, and this can become a tactical difficulty for white as well. So I would recommend only using this when it is when you are really able to counter it, when you know the line solidly. This is actually played by Magnus Carlsen. He used it at the 2018 World Championship against Caruana. Gary Kasparov used it. Fabiano Caruana is a really deep theoretical expert into these lines. And of course, Evgeny Sveshnikov, I'm so sorry about the pronunciation, actually popularized this line in the 1970s, and thus the name. And Carlsen and Caruana in 2018 actually played these lines, and I wanted to kind of share it with you. And so after going d6, they played I believe Magnus Carlsen was white in this position, though I'm not completely sure. But in this position after d6, White plays something like knight b to d5. Again, this idea, and then they receive something like they receive knight takes, e takes, and then knight d7. So do this, retreating here, and then this idea of bishop to e2. Oh, sorry, I believe they played a4 in this position. a4, bishop to e7, bishop to oh. That is the wrong move, I suppose. I'm very confused. Give me just a second. I think I'm messing things up right now. In this position, they move knight to b8. They went back. That does not look like too much of a good move, but I suppose it was at the grandmaster level. Apparently going back is better than something like this because this would block off the bishop. But black played this, and then in this position, white played a4. Bishop went e7, and then bishop e2. Castles, knight to d7. After opening up this, they went knight to d7. White went a5, really trying with that queenside attack. Black went a6, kind of staving it off. Knight went knight a3, going back. That's really interesting as well. And then f5. And so these kind of ideas were actually played on the grandmaster level. I think this variation is really unique because it has such immediate central tension. It can also, d5 is a really interesting outpost to be looking at in this variation. Black accepts a lot of structural weaknesses if it, with, for example, something like bishop g5, for example, later on, it staves off. Black accepts a lot of structural weaknesses for a more dynamic play. It really demands a lot of precision, also rich middle game themes, and really complex end games. So a really interesting game to play if you are ready for it. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I hope that was helpful. Obviously, I'm really no expert at any of this, and so I make a lot of mistakes, and if you point them out on the comments section below, I'm really, really grateful. I'll definitely address that in the next video or change this video up and then upload it again so that you guys can have accurate information. Thank you so much for watching and stay curious. Bye!